At 10:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, I set my badge on a glass desk and said, okay. 2 words, that's all it took to crash 2,800 stores across 40 states. I didn't touch a single line of code, I just went home. My name is Walter Briggs, I'm 54 years old. And until that Tuesday morning, I was the Senior Infrastructure Director for Eldridge Supply Co. Let me back up. You know what keeps a 2,800 location retail chain running? Not the executives in their glass offices, not the MBA consultants with their color-coded decks. It's the guy in the basement server room at 2 a.m. on a holiday weekend, eating vending machine crackers and rewriting a patch for code that was old when Reagan was president. That was me. For 22 years, that was me. Carl Eldridge hired me back when the company had 200 stores and a network that crashed every third Tuesday. He found me at a competitor's hardware store, fixing their point-of-sale terminal while I was supposed to be buying a box of screws. I had my toolkit in my car. I always had my toolkit in my car. Carl stood there and watched me for about 10 minutes without saying a word. When I was done, he handed me his card. You didn't ask permission, he said. You just fixed it. I told him I wasn't looking for a job. He said, you will be. He was right. 2 weeks later, I was elbow deep in Eldridge's server room, pulling cable and rewriting access protocols that hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. Carl wasn't a tech guy, but he understood that technology is infrastructure, same as concrete and steel. You build it right or the whole thing falls down on you. He never bothered me about culture fit or team energy. He called me when things broke and left me alone when they didn't. For 22 years, that arrangement worked perfectly. Then Carl died. The funeral was on a Thursday in October. I wore my one good suit, stood in the back. A lot of people talked about Carl's vision, his values, his legacy. Most of them had never spent a single night in a server room. I didn't say anything. I watched them lower the casket and I knew exactly what was going into the ground with him. Institutional memory. The understanding that what kept this company alive wasn't the marketing campaigns or the investor calls. It was the systems. The unglamorous, invisible humming in the Pybrone systems that processed every transaction, tracked every bolt and bracket in every warehouse, and made sure that when a contractor in Tulsa needed 400 feet of copper wire on a Friday afternoon, the register worked and the inventory was right. Carl knew that. His son Scott did not. Scott Eldridge was 33 years old with an MBA from Harvard, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly wrong about anything that actually mattered. He moved into the COO role 6 months after the funeral. First thing he did was replace Carl's old oak desk with a glass slab, the kind that looks impressive and scratches if you breathe on it wrong. Second thing he did was hire a consulting firm to audit company culture. Third thing he did was start sending emails about energy alignment and innovation posture and leaning into transformational momentum. I deleted every one of them. I had bigger problems. Our core transaction system was 15 years old, held together by custom scripts I had written personally and a daily maintenance routine that only I fully understood. We were in the middle of migrating terabytes of customer loyalty data from our aging Phoenix cluster to a new secure environment. The migration window was tight. Any interruption could corrupt records for half the Midwest. I didn't have time for culture audits, but Scott had time for me. On a Tuesday morning, Patty, his executive assistant, appeared at my server room door. She had the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind you wear when you're delivering news someone isn't going to like. Walter, Scott would like to connect with you right now. I didn't look up from my monitors. We're not scheduled. I'm mid-transfer. If I stop now, we lose loyalty point records for about 600,000 customers. I'm sure it can wait just a few minutes, she said. He's really excited to share some new thinking. I looked at the screen. Transfer was stable. I had maybe a 20-minute window before the next critical checkpoint. Fine. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more. The air up there always smelled different. Less like work, more like money trying to smell like work. Scott's office looked like a boutique hotel. The oak desk was gone, glass everywhere. A whiteboard covered in OKRs and KPIs that nobody had bothered to define. Scott was standing by the window in a suit that cost more than my first car, looking out at the skyline like he was posing for a magazine cover. Walter, he said my name like we were old friends. Come in, water. I have this mineral blend. It's supposed to help with cognitive focus. I'm good. I've got a transfer running. What's the issue? He sat down, crossed his legs, picked up a folder from his desk. My personnel file. No issue, he said. Just a check-in, a culture alignment conversation. He opened the folder, tapped it once with one finger like he was making a point he'd rehearsed. Walter, your technical numbers are exceptional. System uptime over the past 22 years is about as close to perfect as I've ever seen. Security record is clean. 0 major breaches on your watch. He paused. But here's where we have a gap. He said the word gap like it was a diagnosis. Culture fit. Team energy. Engagement metrics. These are the pillars of our new operating model, and frankly, when I look at your participation scores, your 360 feedback, the way you show up in cross-functional spaces, the picture isn't great. I looked at him for a moment. I manage back-end infrastructure for 2,800 stores, I said. My job is to make sure the terminals don't crash when 40 million people are trying to buy lumber and paint and pipe fittings on a Saturday morning. That's my culture. That's my energy, he pointed at me. Actually pointed, like I just walked into a trap he'd set. See that right there? That energy, it's heavy. It closes doors instead of opening them. We're building a company that leans forward, Walter. We need people who say yes. People who bring lift to the room. I didn't say anything. I had learned a long time ago that when someone starts talking about energy and lift, they've already made their decision. The conversation is just paperwork. I've engaged a new firm, Scott said. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Cloud-native agile infrastructure model. Young team, very sharp. They've done rollouts for companies 3 times our size. They'll be taking over the technical operations. I looked at the paper. Standard termination letter, effective immediately. 3-week severance. I looked back at him. Does your new team know about the Briggs Sentinel? I asked. He blinked. The what? The Briggs Sentinel. The security fail-safe your father and I built into the system in 2009. After the data breach that almost cost the company 4 million customer records, Carl and I spent 6 months building a custodian authentication protocol. It runs automatically every 45 minutes. It requires a manual login from a primary admin account. My account. If it doesn't get that authentication, it assumes the network has been compromised or the custodian is gone, and then it initiates lockdown. Scott stared at me for a second, then he leaned back in his chair and did something I wasn't expecting. He laughed. Oh, come on, he said. You're telling me ghost stories. I'm telling you how the system works, Walter. His voice shifted. The friendly act was over. Every system has a handoff process. That's what transition planning is for. The new team will handle it. The documentation for the Sentinel isn't in the shared drive. It never was. Your father wanted it that way for security reasons. It lives in the internal ops manual that only I have access to. The new team won't know to look for it because they won't know it exists. Then you'll brief them before you leave. I looked at him. You said effective immediately. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not doubt exactly. More like irritation at being slowed down. Fine. You can have until end of day. I have a migration running right now that I can't abandon. It'll take at least 4 hours to complete safely. After that, I need to document the Sentinel handoff, the legacy script dependencies, the manual override procedures for the East Coast pricing cluster, and about 30 other things that exist only because I built them and kept them running. That's not an afternoon job, Scott. That's 2 weeks minimum. He stood up. I appreciate the theatrics, Walter. I really do. But this is a business decision and it's final. Patty will walk you out. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. We'll mail anything we miss. He held out his hand. Your badge, please. I stood there for a moment. I thought about calling the CTO. Thought about demanding a meeting with the board. Thought about laying out exactly what was about to happen in language even Scott could understand. Then I looked at his face, the certainty on it, the complete absence of doubt. He wasn't going to hear me. He'd already written the ending to this story in his head, and I wasn't in it. I reached into my pocket and took out my badge. 22 years of daily handling had worn the edges smooth. I set it on the glass desk. It made a small, clean sound. Okay, I said. He looked surprised. He'd been ready for a fight just like that. You're the COO, I said. Effective immediately. I follow instructions precisely. I walked to the door, put my hand on the handle, stopped. Scott. Yeah, he was already reaching for his phone. Check the logs. He didn't look up. Sure thing. I walked out. My last authenticated action had been at 9:30 a.m. right before Patty had appeared at my server room door. I'd run a routine check on the migration progress, verified the transfer rate, logged out. That was it. The Briggs Sentinel ran its first check at 10:15 a.m. It sent a handshake request to my admin account. No response. It sent a second request 30 seconds later. Still nothing. The protocol was clear. If the primary custodian cannot be reached, assume hostile event. Sever all external store connections. Protect the data, 2,800 locations. Every register, every scanner, every payment terminal, all of them at once. I was in the elevator when my phone buzzed the first time. Then again. Then it started buzzing without stopping. Nolan, one of my junior analysts, got through first. He was 26 years old, the only one on the team who'd ever stayed late just to ask questions about how the legacy systems actually worked. Walter, your account just went dark. Transaction servers are throwing yellow flags across the board. What's happening? I watched the lobby floor numbers count down. I didn't answer. I wasn't the senior infrastructure director anymore. The new Agile team could sort it out. They had apps. I walked through the lobby without stopping. The security guys at the front desk looked up. I gave them a nod. They nodded back, same as every morning for 22 years, except this time I kept walking. The parking garage was quiet. I got in my car, a 10-year-old sedan with 140,000 miles on it and a coffee stain on the passenger seat that had been there since 2019. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there and watched the clock on the dashboard. 10:16 a.m., 1 minute past the window. Somewhere in a data center in Phoenix, the Briggs Sentinel had just sent its second unanswered handshake. The protocol was already running. I could picture the sequence like I'd written it myself because I had query to primary custodian account. No response. Secondary query, no response. Status flag set to unverified, external connection suspension initiated across all 2,800 nodes. Every store in the network going dark at exactly the same moment. My phone was ringing again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, then again. I turned the volume down and set it on the passenger seat and watched it light up over and over like something desperate trying to get out of a box. At 10:47, Hank Garner called. Hank managed 60 stores across Texas and Oklahoma. He'd been with the company almost as long as I had. Good man, straight talker, never sent an email when a phone call would do. I picked up. Walter. His voice was tight in a way I'd only heard a few times before during ice storms and a warehouse fire in 2018. My registers are dead, all 60 locations. Every screen is showing the same thing, a locked logo and the words custodian offline. I've got customers standing in line and cashiers who don't know what to tell them. Help desk isn't answering. I called the monitoring room and got some kid who sounded like he was about to cry. Sounds like a network lockdown, I said. I know what it is, Walter. Why is it happening? Scott Eldridge let me go this morning, effective immediately. Nobody completed the authentication handoff before my credentials were revoked. Silence, the kind that means someone is choosing their next words very carefully. He didn't know about the Sentinel. No, how bad is this going to get? Stage 2 is encryption of backup drives. That kicks in 90 minutes after initial lockdown. Stage 3 starts encrypting customer payment data at the 150-minute mark. Once Stage 3 completes, recovery takes weeks, maybe longer. More silence. Walter, they're already blaming you. There's a company-wide email going out right now. Subject line is something about system upgrade complications. The body implies a former employee deliberately disrupted operations. I looked out through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking garage. Thanks for telling me, Hank. What are you going to do? Right now I'm going to call my lawyer. After that I'm going to go home. I hung up and dialed my lawyer before the screen even went dark. Told him about the email. He asked me to forward it the moment I had it. Nolan came through 2 minutes later, forwarding Scott's message from his personal email with a single line underneath it. I saved a copy. Thought you should have it, smart kid. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a timestamp, then I drove home by 1 p.m. It was on CNBC. I sat on my couch and watched a reporter standing outside the Eldridge flagship in Manhattan, traffic noise behind her, looking very serious about building supplies. Total transaction failure across all Eldridge supply locations nationwide. No sales have been processed in nearly 3 hours. Analysts are estimating revenue losses at approximately $422 million per hour. The company has not yet issued a public statement. I did the math without trying. 3 hours at $4.2 million was $12,006 million. My annual salary was $112,000. They had lost more than 100 years of my salary in a single morning to avoid paying it. My phone buzzed. Nolan again. Outside consultants arrived. They tried to run a bypass on the Sentinel. Triggered stage 2. Backup drives are encrypting now. Scott threw a laptop, not exaggerating, an actual laptop. Board called an emergency session. Brenda Voss is running it. They know it's not sabotage. They're asking for you. I read it twice. Set the phone down. Watched the reporter on TV switch to a live feed from a store in New Jersey where a manager was handing out paper vouchers to customers in line. At 1:34 p.m., my house phone rang. Not my cell. The landline that almost nobody had the number for. I let it ring 4 times. Then I picked up Walter, Brenda Voss. Board chair, former corporate attorney, the kind of person who got very quiet when things got serious. We've reviewed the situation. Have you? There was a failure in transition protocol. Scott moved too quickly without understanding the technical dependencies. He called it sabotage in a company-wide email. I'm aware that email is being addressed. A pause. We need you to come back. Name your terms. I looked at the clock on the wall. 1:35 p.m. Stage 3 was set to initiate at the 150-minute mark from initial lockdown. Lockdown had triggered at 10:15 a.m. That put Stage 3 at 12:45 p.m. We were already past it. Brenda, I said, Stage 3 started about 50 minutes ago. Customer payment data is actively encrypting right now. I have maybe a 30-minute window before the process completes and becomes irreversible. After that, you're looking at a forensic recovery that takes months and costs more than I want to think about. The silence on her end was different this time. Not hesitation. Calculation. Name your terms, Walter. I reached into my shirt pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. I had written it in the parking garage before I left the building, sitting in my car watching the dashboard clock tick past 10:16 a.m. Not because I planned any of this, because after 22 years of building systems that anticipated failure, I had learned to think 2 steps ahead out of pure habit. I unfolded it and started reading. A board seat, a new executive position, chief systems officer, with full veto authority over any operational decision touching infrastructure. Any outsourcing contract over $50,000 required my written approval, and the immediate resignation of Scott Eldridge for gross operational negligence. Brenda didn't say anything for a long moment. That's a significant ask. So is encrypting the payment records of 14 million loyalty customers. Another pause. Shorter this time. Give me 20 minutes. You have 15, I said, and send a car. I'm not driving myself back in for this. She hung up. I folded the paper back into my pocket and turned the TV off. The reporter had moved on to something about interest rates. The Eldridge situation was already yesterday's news to her. For the people standing in line at 2,800 stores holding items they couldn't buy, it was very much still today's problem. 14 minutes later, a black town car pulled into my driveway. The driver didn't say much, just nodded when I got in. The whole ride in, I watched the city go by and thought about Carl Eldridge standing in a competitor's store in 2002 watching a stranger fix a register he had no business touching, handing over a card saying you'll change your mind. He'd been right about a lot of things. The executive floor smelled like panic, not the dramatic kind you see in movies. The quiet kind where people are moving a little too fast and talking a little too carefully, and nobody is making eye contact in the hallway. 3 people I passed looked at me like I was either a ghost or a paramedic. Maybe both. The monitoring room had been turned into a war room. The full board was crammed into a space built for 5 analysts. Every screen showed system status maps with red indicators across the country. The countdown for Stage 3 completion was on the main display. Scott was standing in the corner. His jacket was off. His collar was open. He looked like a man who had spent the last 3 hours learning something he could not unlearn. When I walked in, the room went quiet. Brenda stepped forward. Walter, thank you for coming. I didn't look at her right away. I looked at Scott. How's the energy level? I said. He stared at me. You did this on purpose. I went home, I said. You told me effective immediately. I followed instructions precisely. That's what I do. You knew exactly what would happen. I warned you what would happen in your office about 4 hours ago. You called it ghost stories. He opened his mouth. Brenda held up one hand and he stopped Walter. She was holding a single sheet of paper. My terms already signed by 4 board members. We've agreed to your conditions. Scott pushed off the wall. You can't be serious. You're letting him dictate terms after you terminated the sole custodian of a mission-critical security protocol without a transition plan, Brenda said, her voice flat and final. Without notifying the board, without a technical review, based on a culture assessment. She looked at him the way you look at something you've already decided to remove. Scott. Security is waiting outside. He looked around the room for support. Every set of eyes found somewhere else to be. Patty, standing near the door, studied the floor. The board members looked at the screens. Nolan, wedged in the back corner, looked at me, just for a second, then away. Scott straightened his collar, picked up his jacket, walked out without another word. 2 security guards fell in beside him in the hallway. Men I had said good morning to every single day for 22 years. They didn't look back. I sat down in my chair. Someone had wheeled it up from the server room. It fit my back the way it always had, the cushion worn into the exact shape of 22 years of long shifts. Nolan, I said, plug the hardline into the admin port. He was already moving. I pulled the keyboard close, typed the 47-character password I had memorized in 2011 and never written down anywhere. Then I pressed my thumb to the biometric scanner built into the side of the terminal housing, the one that had been there since 2009, the one Scott's consultants had spent 3 hours looking for and never found. The screen went red, then yellow, then green. Identity confirmed. Welcome back, custodian. Stage 3 encryption halted. Restoring external connections, the countdown disappeared. The red indicators on the map started turning green, one cluster at a time. Texas first, then the southeast, then the whole grid lighting up like someone flipping switches in a dark building, store by store, register by register. The room erupted. Board members who had been holding their breath for hours actually cheered. Someone slapped Nolan on the back hard enough to make him stumble. Brenda let out a long breath and took off her reading glasses and rubbed her eyes. Transaction logs started scrolling across the secondary screen. Store 089 online. Store 0247 online. A box of deck screws in Tulsa. 2 gallons of exterior paint in Charlotte. A sheet of plywood in Sacramento. Real things, real money. The ordinary commerce of ordinary people getting on with their day. I watched the logs and didn't say anything. 3 hours later, I was back in the server room. Cold air, the smell of ozone and old electrical work and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. I walked to the main rack and put my hand on the casing. Felt the vibration of the drives running clean. Dramatic, I said quietly. The fans kept going, low and steady. I was the chief systems officer now, board seat. Executive salary, a clause in my contract that meant nobody could outsource a single piece of this infrastructure without my signature. I had more job security than anyone in that building. But standing there in the cold with the hum of the machines around me, I was still the same thing I had always been. The guy who kept the lights on. The custodian. The only difference was now they knew what the lights cost. If you have spent your career being the person who makes everything work, the one they call when something breaks at midnight, the one who never gets mentioned until something goes wrong, then you already know what this story is really about. It is not about revenge, it is about value. Real value, the kind that cannot be downloaded or disrupted or replaced with fresh energy. If you are that person at your company right now, do not let them forget what you're worth, because the moment they do, the lights go out, and then finally they will understand.